1976 snub. NASA's Viking 1 and the labeled release. On the 20th of July 1976, NASA's Viking 1 lander touched down on Mars. This wasn't some Instagram-friendly rover with a Twitter account. It was a cold, hard piece of machinery designed for one thing, to see if Mars was breathing. The labeled release, LR, experiment was deceptively simple. You scoop up some Martian dirt, inject it with a nutrient soup tagged with radioactive carbon 1,4, and wait. If there are microbes in the soil, they'll eat the soup and exhale radioactive CO2. It's the most basic metabolic burp of life. But NASA didn't pop champagne. They panicked. Another instrument on the lander, the GCMS, gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, failed to find organic molecules. So, the adults in the room decided that the LR result, the one that actually worked, must have been a freak chemical reaction caused by exotic peroxides in the soil. Basically, they argued the dirt was just angry, not alive. The pulse of the dead here is where it gets creepy. Decades later, researchers re-examined the Viking data using modern complexity analysis. They found that the gas release wasn't just a random chemical burst, it had a circadian rhythm. For the uninitiated, dead chemistry doesn't care about the time of day. It just reacts until it's done. But biology has a clock. These reactions on Mars fluctuated in a 24, 6-hour cycle, perfectly synchronized with the Martian day-night rhythm. Gilbert Levin, the man who built the experiment, spent the rest of his life, until he died in 2021, shouting from the rooftops that we found life on Mars. NASA's response? They never sent another life detection experiment again. Every rover we've sent since then is a glorified geologist. We're looking for habitability, the potential for life, while the actual evidence of life is sitting in a 1970s filing cabinet gathering dust. And then spending the next 50 years studying the corpse's diet to see if it could have been alive. The red ink of Sagittarius. Fast forward to the 15th of August 1977, while the world was mourning Elvis, astronomer Jerry Eman was looking at a computer printout from the Big Ear Radio telescope. Among the sea of random numbers, representing cosmic background noise, a sequence appeared. 6EJ5. In radio astronomy terms, this is the equivalent of a heavy metal concert starting in the middle of a library. Eman was so shocked he circled the sequence in red ink and wrote, "Wow." In the margin. The signal was a narrowband radio transmission at 1,420 megahertz. For the non-nerds, that is the hydrogen line. It's the most fundamental frequency in the universe. If you wanted to send a universal hello to another species, this is the channel you'd use. It's the Cosmic 911. The Disappearing Act. The signal lasted exactly 72 seconds, the maximum duration the telescope could track a single point in the sky. It came from the direction of Sagittarius, a neighborhood crowded with sun-like stars. And then, nothing. It never happened again. The skeptics, who are usually just people terrified of being wrong, spent decades trying to blame it on satellites, military planes, or even reflecting comets. In 2017, someone tried to blame a couple of comets, but the math didn't hold up. Comets don't broadcast at 1,420 megahertz with that kind of power. It's like trying to explain a laser beam by saying someone was waving a wet noodle. The math of coincidence. The wow. Signal matches every single predicted parameter of an extraterrestrial broadcast. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. Natural sources don't focus their energy into such a tiny, specific slice of the radio spectrum. So why don't we accept it? Because it's unrepeatable. Science likes things that happen twice. But if a stranger yells your name in a dark alley and then disappears, you don't conclude that sound doesn't exist because he didn't do it a second time. You conclude you're being watched. We're still looking at Sagittarius, but maybe they've moved on. Or maybe they realize we're the kind of species that hears a hello and spends 50 years arguing that it was just a comet with a radio habit. The hellscape's secret. Phosphine in the clouds of Venus. Let's talk about Venus. If Mars is a cold, dead basement, Venus is a pressurized pizza oven filled with battery acid. It's the last place any sane person would look for life. The surface temperature is 465 degrees Celsius $, 870 degrees Fahrenheit $, hot enough to melt lead and turn a human into a charred briquette in seconds. But in September 2020, astronomer Jane Greaves and her team pointed their telescopes at the temperate cloud decks about 50 kilometers up. At that altitude, the pressure and temperature are shockingly Earth-like. And there they found it. Phosphine. On a rocky planet like Earth, phosphine is a biological calling card. It's produced by anaerobic bacteria, tiny organisms that thrive in places where oxygen is a luxury, like the muck at the bottom of a swamp or the intestines of a penguin. Unless you have a massive chemical factory, you don't get phosphine without life. The scientific community went into a defensive crouch immediately. "It's a data error!" they shouted. "It's sulfur dioxide!" But even as the debate rages, the models show that no known volcanic or atmospheric process can explain that much phosphine. If it's there, something is making it. Something is living, floating, and dying in the sulfuric acid clouds of a planet we've ignored for decades because we were too arrogant to think life could be that metal. We defined habitable based on our own fragile skin, while biology might be laughing at us from the acidic mists of a furnace. Oumuamua, the guest who didn't fit in then, came October 2017. An object from another star system screamed through our backyard. We called it Oumuamua Hawaiian for Scout. This thing was weird. Really weird. It was shaped like a cigar, or a pancake, about 10 times longer than it was wide. No asteroid in our solar system looks like that. But the real kicker? As it rounded the sun and headed back into the dark, it accelerated. Now, comets do this because they vent gas like a natural rocket engine. But Oumuamua didn't have a tail. No dust, no gas, no coma. It just pushed off. Avi Loeb, the head of astronomy at Harvard, looked at the data and did the unthinkable. He suggested it was artificial. He proposed it was a light sail, a piece of thin, highly reflective technology pushed by solar radiation. The backlash was immediate. Scientists who hadn't even looked at the raw data called him a sensationalist. They tried to invent new types of matter to explain it: hydrogen icebergs or dust bunnies, materials that have never been seen and probably couldn't survive the trip. Think about that. The rational community preferred to invent imaginary space ice that defies physics rather than admit that maybe, just maybe, someone else's trash just drifted through our solar system. We are so terrified of not being the smartest things in the room that we'd rather rewrite the laws of nature than send a hello to the neighbor. BLC-1. The call from the house next door. If you want to find aliens, you look at the nearest star, right? Proxima Centauri is only 4.2 light years away. In 2019, the Breakthrough Listen project caught a signal coming from there. Blekuno. It was a narrowband signal at 982 megahertzes. It drifted in frequency exactly the way a signal would if it were coming from a rotating planet orbiting that star. It passed every test. It looked like the real deal. 2 years later, the team published a paper saying it was likely terrestrial interference. Case closed. Right? Not really. They couldn't actually find the source on Earth. They just decided that because we haven't found aliens yet, the probability of finding them at the very first star we checked was too high to be true. It's circular logic at its finest. We haven't found them, so this can't be them, which proves we haven't found them. We are the detectives who find a smoking gun at the neighbor's house and decide it must be a toy. Because neighbors don't usually have guns. The Drake equation. A funeral for logic. Frank Drake gave us a formula to estimate how many civilizations are out there. For decades, we plugged in safe, conservative numbers because we didn't want to look like crackpots. But then the data started coming in. We found out that almost every star has planets. We found out that Earth-like worlds are as common as dirt. We found out that life on Earth started almost the second the crust cooled down. When you plug the minimum confirmed scientific numbers into the Drake equation today, the result is haunting. Even if you're a massive pessimist, the math says there should be at least one other civilization in the Milky Way right now. If you're a realist, there should be thousands. So where are they? Maybe they're hiding. Or maybe, and this is the dark part, they all hit a wall. Maybe intelligence is a self-destruct mechanism. Or maybe they're shouting at the top of their lungs and we're just too busy arguing about hydrogen ice to listen. The sworn testimony. David Grush. Finally, we get to the suits. In July 2023, David Grush, a high-level intelligence officer with a resume longer than your arm, stood before the US, Congress, and, under penalty of perjury, said the words we've been waiting for. We have non-human craft. He didn't say he saw a light. He said the government has a multi-decade program dedicated to retrieving and reverse engineering crashed UFOs, now called UAPs. He mentioned biologics as in bodies. The skeptics will tell you he's a liar or a disinformation agent. But why would a man with top secret clearance throw his entire career and freedom away for a tall tale? Why is Congress, the most divided group of people on the planet, suddenly passing bipartisan laws to manage the disclosure of technologies of unknown origin? The Galileo Project. Scientific vigilantism. While the government hides behind national security, Avi Loeb, the Oumuamua guy, has had enough. He started the Galileo Project. He's tired of waiting for the Pentagon to release grainy videos of Tic Tacs. He's setting up his own sensors, his own cameras, and his own AI to track what's in our skies. For the first time, the search for the others isn't happening in a dark alley or a classified bunker. It's happening in the open, with peer-reviewed data. And the early results? They're seeing things that birds, drones, and balloons can't explain. The final horror. The cage. Here is the cold, hard truth. The evidence isn't missing. It's being filtered. Whether it's NASA ignoring the breath of Mars in 1976, astronomers dismissing the WOW signal as a fluke, or the military hiding craft in underground hangars, the pattern is the same. We are being kept in a state of artificial loneliness. We like to think of ourselves as the masters of the universe, the pinnacle of evolution. But what if we're just the uncontacted tribe in the middle of a cosmic jungle? What if the silence isn't because no one is there, but because they've all agreed that we aren't ready to join the conversation? We are looking for a signal when the sky might be a network. We are looking for a visitor when they might be the landlords. And as the evidence piles up from the clouds of Venus to the halls of Congress, the walls of our cage are starting to look very, very thin. Keep looking up. But don't be surprised if, one day soon, you realize something is looking back. And it's not smiling.